Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a city that just achieved its lowest crime rates in 25 years. You'd think that's not just, a cause for celebration, but maybe a testament to effective local work, right? A model of success.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that's precisely what Memphis, Tennessee has managed to do. We're talking overall crime down a staggering 44%.
44%, that's huge.
It really is. And homicides down 30% compared to the same time last year. And yet, despite this clear success, on September 12th, 2025, President Trump announced he's sending in the National Guard.
It's a jarring contrast.
Absolutely.
So what we want to do today is take all this information, official crime stats, legal stuff, political statements, the history, and really try to distill it for you, help you get the most important bits. Because this isn't just about Memphis, is it? It feels bigger.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this whole situation raises some really critical questions. Questions about presidential power, the role of the military inside the U.S., and maybe most importantly, why? Why are cities that are actually showing improvement, like demonstrably getting safer, suddenly being targeted for this kind of federal intervention?
Right.
So we'll look at the what exactly happened, and crucially, the why it matters to you, wherever you might be listening.
And the information we're using, it's a mix, right? Official stats, court documents, things people have said.
Yeah, exactly. Official city and federal crime data, legal analyses from cases that are actually happening right now, direct political commentary. And we've gathered everything to be current as of September 15th, 2025, just so you have the latest picture.
Okay, good. So let's start with the announcement itself. President Trump in Memphis. How did this all kick off? It was pretty sudden, wasn't it?
Oh, very sudden. And kind of typical for how these things sometimes break. President Trump made the announcement live on Fox and Friends September 12th. His words were pretty direct. We're going to Memphis. Memphis is deeply troubled. That was the framing.
Deeply troubled. Okay. And his justification, did he say why he thought they needed this?
He did. He claimed, interestingly, that both the Democratic mayor, Paul Young, and the Republican governor, Bill Lee, were happy with his plan. That's what he said on air.
Happy.
Yeah. But then came the more concerning part, the threats. He said, quote, "We'll bring in the military, too, if we need it, and promise to deploy National Guard and anybody else we need." It wasn't like an offer of help, It was a clear statement of intent. And the fact that local officials apparently found out watching TV, well, that says a lot.
Finding out on the news.
Wow.
Okay, so that's the narrative, deeply troubled. But you mentioned the stats earlier. How does that narrative stack up against the actual numbers that were out before he said this?
It doesn't stack up at all. I mean, the disconnect is, frankly, staggering.
Yeah.
Let's really dig into those Memphis numbers because they tell a completely different story.
Yeah, let's hear them.
Okay, so overall crime, down 44% from 2024. That's huge. We're talking incidents dropping from about 53,800 down to just under 30,000 for the same period.
Wow.
Homicides, maybe the most visible indicator, down 30%, from 261 last year to 182 this year. And here's the kicker. This puts overall crime at a 25-year low.
25 years?
25 years. And murders at a 6-year low. It's not just like a blip. It's a real trend.
And other crimes, too.
Yep. Robbery, burglary, larceny, all reported at 25-year lows as well.
Right.
So the intervention isn't just, happening alongside improving stats. It's flying directly against them.
So the question becomes why? If the data shows improvement, what's the justification based on?
Well, that brings us to another interesting point. President Trump didn't just talk in generalities. He used a very specific, very vivid anecdote.
Ah, right, the CEO story.
Exactly. He cited a story supposedly from the CEO of Union Pacific, who allegedly claimed he needs an armored vehicle with bulletproof glass just to go 1 block in Memphis.
That's quite an image. An armored car for 1 block.
It's incredibly powerful, isn't it? And that's the point. Anecdotes like that, especially unverified ones, can shape perception way more than dry statistics sometimes.
Has it been verified? Did Union Pacific confirm this?
No. There's been zero verification for that claim. We know the CEO is an ex-FedEx board member, which gives some Memphis context, I suppose, but it doesn't back up the story itself. The key thing here isn't whether one person felt unsafe, but how an unproven dramatic story like that gets used at the highest level to justify, sending in troops, even when the official data points the other way.
It's using narrative over numbers.
Precisely. It makes you question if policy is being driven by facts or by, stories that fit a certain agenda.
So given all this, how did the mayor of Memphis, Paul Young, react? He supposedly was happy about it, according to the president.
Well, his actions spoke louder than those reported words. Mayor Young held a press conference almost immediately on September 12th, and he was very clear, quote, "I did not ask for the National Guard." And he added, "I don't think it is the way to drive down crime."
So definitely not happy and surprised, too.
Completely surprised. He said he learned about it from the morning news, just like everyone else. No call, no heads up.
That's astonishing for something this major.
It really highlights a lack of communication or maybe a deliberate bypassing of local leadership. And Mayor Young was proactive. He actually called the mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, presumably to ask, what does this look like? What should we expect? Because D.C. had just gone through something similar.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Did he say what kind of help he would want, if any?
Yes, he was specific. He said if federal help was needed, he'd prefer resources from agencies like the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, actual law enforcement investigators, not the military.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
Law enforcement versus military.
The fundamental one, yeah.
Okay, so the mayor wasn't on board. What about the Memphis City Council? Were they welcoming the Guard?
No, not at all. The city council's reaction was pretty much aligned with the mayor's and maybe even stronger in some cases. Councilwoman Jerry Green, who's a Democrat and also running for governor, she called it unwarranted and undemocratic.
Strong words.
Very. She also called it political theater to terrorize our community. And she made a really practical point, too. She noted that a lot of Guard members are local cops or firefighters.
Oh, right. Pulled from their day job.
Exactly. So deploying them in this federal role could actually weaken essential city services right when you need them.
That's a crucial point. Anyone else from the council?
Yeah, Councilman Jeff Warren, another Democrat, he had a slightly more maybe nuanced take, but still critical. He said it might be legal, but definitely not what we need. And he brought up something really important. He pointed out that the Trump administration had previously cut $500 million, $500 million, in violence prevention grants.
Wait, they cut violence prevention funding before sending the Guard?
That's what Councilman Warren highlighted. He argued the Guard isn't a long-term fix, and cutting the prevention funds makes it look even more like, a short-sighted or maybe even politically motivated move.
So the question becomes, how does cutting funds that were working locally and then sending in the military actually help, it seems, counterproductive?
Deeply counterproductive is how critics would frame it. It raises serious questions about the strategy.
Okay, so mayor opposes it, council opposes it, but there was some support within Tennessee, right? The governor.
Yes, that's the counterpoint. Republican Governor Bill Lee did support the deployment. He framed it differently.
Also.
He talked about a multi-phased strategy, said it would involve the Tennessee National Guard, but also coordinated with the FBI and the State Highway Patrol.
Okay, so presenting it as a coordinated effort.
Right. And he also mentioned something called Operation Viper, describing it as a secret federal initiative.
Operation Viper. What is that?
Details are scarce, honestly. Sources suggest it's some kind of multi-agency task force targeting high crime areas, but its exact scope and how it fits into this Memphis deployment, well, that remains pretty unclear. It being called secret doesn't help transparency.
So we have this clear split. City leadership pushing back hard, state governor supporting it, and mentioning this mysterious Operation Viper.
Exactly. It really shows the political fault lines this kind of federal action can create within a state.
And this whole situation in Memphis, it didn't happen in a vacuum. There was a major precedent set just before this, wasn't there, in Washington, D.C.?
Absolutely. You really can't understand Memphis without looking at what happened in D.C. starting around August 11th, 2025. President Trump called it Liberation Day.
Liberation Day. Wow. What exactly went down in D.C.?
It was extraordinary. During a press conference, Trump used really strong language. We're going to take our capital back, talking about getting rid of the slums. He declared a crime emergency.
Using what authority?
He used a provision in the 1973 Home Rule Act, Section 740, and that move effectively put the D.C. Metro Police, the local police force, under the direct control of the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, at the time.
So federalizing the local police.
Essentially, yes. And then came the troops. Initially, over 800 National Guard members deployed, but that number eventually grew to over 2,000, a very visible military presence right in the capital.
Just like Memphis, though, didn't the crime emergency narrative clash with D.C.'s actual crime stats? Are we seeing that same pattern again?
We are. It's almost an identical playbook. The D.C. numbers tell a story that directly contradicts the idea of a sudden, uncontrolled crime wave necessitating a federal takeover.
Yeah, let's hear those numbers, too.
All right. When the takeover happened, violent crime in D.C. was already at a 30-year low. 30 years.
Not exactly an emergency surge, then.
Not at all. And it actually continued to drop after the intervention, another 26% in 2025. Homicides were down 12% compared to the previous year. And carjackings, which get a lot of headlines, they were way down. Only 188 compared to almost 1,959 back in 2023. July 2025 was the lowest month for carjacking since May 2020.
So again, intervening where crime is already falling significantly.
Exactly. The pattern is undeniable. Federal intervention targeting cities where safety is demonstrably improving. It forces you to ask, what's the real driver here if it's not rising crime?
So with thousands of troops and federal control in D.C., what did that actually feel like on the ground? What was the impact on the city?
The impact was pretty significant and for many quite negative. Tourism took a hit, people felt uneasy.
I can imagine.
Restaurants, local businesses, they reported losing customers. There were checkpoints set up on major streets. And even though the guard wasn't like patrolling with rifles out constantly, their sheer visible presence changed the whole atmosphere.
You get a sense of occupation almost.
That's how many residents described it. Less like a normal city, more like a place under high alert. It definitely affected daily life, movement, the economy. It shows that the method of intervention, deploying the military, has consequences far beyond just the crime stats, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, this brings us to the legal side of things. This feels like it's bumping right up against some core legal principles, a potential legal earthquake, even a constitutional crisis.
It absolutely is. The core legal issue, the bedrock really, is the Posse Comitatus Act.
Right, from 1878. What does that law actually say?
Basically, it prohibits using the U.S. military, the Army, the Air Force, and by interpretation, often including the National Guard in federal service for domestic law enforcement purposes, unless Congress specifically authorizes it or it falls under very narrow constitutional exceptions like suppressing an insurrection.
So keeping the military out of policing citizens.
Exactly. It's fundamental to avoiding, a militarized state. And this isn't theoretical. There was a direct, very recent precedent involving President Trump.
The Los Angeles case.
Precisely. Just before the Memphis announcement, in June, a federal judge had already ruled that Trump's deployment of 4,000 Guard troops plus 700 Marines to Los Angeles was illegal, specifically because it violated Posse Comitatus.
So a judge had already said, you can't do this for a very similar situation.
Yes. And that case was still active when the Memphis deployment was announced. So the administration knew there were serious legal problems with this approach based on a judicial ruling. That makes the Memphis action even more legally questionable.
Okay, so Posse Comitatus is a huge hurdle. But for D.C., he used that Home Rule Act emergency power. Are there limits on that power, too?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the concern about abusing emergency powers really comes in. The Home Rule Act does let the president use D.C. police for federal purposes in an emergency, but it's incredibly strict.
How strict?
The president has to tell Congress within 48 hours, and this is crucial. The whole thing automatically expires after just 30 days unless Congress explicitly approves an extension.
30 days, that's it.
That's the limit without Congress signing off. Now, here's the thing. Trump's declared emergency for D.C. technically expired on September 10th.
Before the Memphis announcement.
2 days before. Yet, even after it expired, he was threatening to refederalize the D.C. police if they didn't cooperate with ICE immigration and customs enforcement.
So the emergency justification expired, but the pressure continued, linked to something else entirely, immigration.
Exactly. It raises serious questions about using expired emergency powers, or maybe using the threat of them to force compliance on unrelated issues. It really pushes the boundaries of executive authority.
How did D.C.'s own legal system fight back against this? What did the Attorney General do?
D.C. fought back hard. Attorney General Brian Schwab filed a major lawsuit. He called the takeover unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful. And he directly challenged the premise, stating flatly, there is no crime emergency in the District of Columbia, just cutting right through the administration's narrative.
And did the courts weigh in beyond that lawsuit?
Yes. A federal judge actually stepped in and stopped Trump's attempt to replace the D.C. police chief unilaterally. That was a direct judicial check on the federal takeover. Plus, the litigation over the Guard deployment itself is still ongoing.
So the legal battles are very real and active.
Very real. It's not just political noise. It's a fundamental legal fight over constitutional powers.
What about Congress? Did they try to push back legislatively?
There was definitely pushback, mainly from Democrats. Representative Jamie Raskin from Maryland introduced a resolution to actually reverse the D.C. takeover.
What was his argument?
He called it a textbook authoritarian maneuver and said it had nothing to do with fighting crime. He framed it purely as an executive power grab.
Did that resolution have any chance of passing?
Realistically, no, not in a Republican-controlled House at the time. But its introduction was still important. It was a formal statement from the legislative branch, a marker saying, we see this as an overreach.
A symbolic but important gesture.
Exactly. It shows the checks and balances are engaged, even if the political math makes legislative solutions difficult. It highlights the seriousness of the constitutional questions involved.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Is there a pattern to which cities are being targeted? It seems selective.
Oh, the pattern is incredibly clear, and you could argue overtly political.
Well,
Look at the list. Memphis, D.C., both led by Democrats. Then look at the cities Trump has threatened with similar action. Chicago, where Governor Pritzker, a Democrat, pushed back very strongly. Also New York, Baltimore, Boston, St. Louis.
all Democratic strongholds.
Every single one. And remember, the Los Angeles deployment, another Democratic city, was already ruled illegal. But that ruling doesn't seem to have stopped the pattern.
So it looks less like targeting crime hotspots, objectively, and more like targeting political opposition.
That's certainly how critics interpret it. The focus seems consistently on cities run by Democrats, suggesting a political motive rather than a purely data-driven public safety strategy.
But if the goal is public safety, surely there are other places with high crime rates, maybe in Republican-led states, that aren't getting this attention.
That's the glaring inconsistency. If you look at the official FBI crime data, like the 2024 stats, it tells a very different story about where violent crime is highest.
Where is it highest, according to the data?
Southern states, predominantly Republican-led states, consistently top the list for violent crime and homicide rates. Louisiana has the highest murder rate in the country.
Louisiana, okay.
Tennessee itself.
Yeah.
Memphis's home state has the third highest murder rate. Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, all usually in the top 10 for violent crime.
And these states aren't seeing federal troops deployed.
Not at all. In fact, the data also shows that rural areas, often in these same red states, frequently have the highest crime rates per capita. Yet the focus remains entirely on these specific blue cities.
So why the selective focus? If it's about crime, why ignore higher crime rates elsewhere?
It strongly suggests the goal isn't just public safety across the board. The insight here seems to be that the administration's actions are guided by a political map, not a crime map. They're intervening where it aligns with a certain narrative or political goal, not necessarily where the statistics show the greatest need.
What's the broader political game here, then? What's the calculation?
Well, politically, it plays well with a certain segment of the population. Polls consistently showed decent public support, sometimes over 50%, for Trump's handling of crime. Crime and immigration are core issues for his base and his platform. So deploying the military, looking tough, taking action in democratic styles, it sends a powerful message to his supporters.
So it's partly about energizing the base.
Partly that, yes. And partly, critics argue about testing the limits of executive power, pushing those authoritarian boundaries. The constant focus on Democratic mayors feeds the narrative that these cities are failing and need federal intervention.
So it's a mix of politics and potentially expanding power.
Exactly. It's not just about crime stats. It's a political strategy wrapped up in a debate about executive authority.
Let's talk about what was actually working in Memphis before this intervention, because they were succeeding, right? How were they achieving those crime reductions?
They really were. It wasn't magic. It was hard work and smart local strategies. They had enhanced police tactics, using data analysis much more effectively to target resources where they were needed most.
So data-driven policing.
Yes, very much so. But also crucial were the youth violence prevention programs getting ahead of the problem, offering alternatives. It wasn't just reactive.
Community involvement, too.
Absolutely. Strong community police collaboration was key. Building trust, getting information flowing both ways. Plus, they had increased help from the State Highway Patrol, coordinating efforts. It was a multi-layered approach, and it was demonstrably working. Those 25-year lows weren't an accident. Memphis was actively fixing its own problems.
Which makes the next part even more, frustrating. The fact that federal support for these kinds of programs was actually cut before the guard was sent in.
Yes, this is that critical, almost unbelievable detail we touched on earlier. The Trump administration eliminated $500 million in federal violence prevention grants nationwide.
$500 million. Gone.
Gone. And another $170 million cut from community intervention programs. So the pattern seems to be defund the successful local programs, watch as cities struggle without those resources, then declare a crisis, and then send in the military as the solution.
It feels like setting things up to fail. almost.
That's certainly one interpretation. It suggests a preference for a militarized response over supporting community-based solutions, even when those solutions are proven effective. It's a paradox. Take away the tools that work, then complain the job isn't getting done, and bring in a hammer.
And for Memphis specifically, there's a painful history with the National Guard, isn't there? This isn't just an abstract deployment for them.
No, it's deeply resonant and for many traumatic. Pastor Keith Norman at First Baptist Church called the Guard a moderately traumatic memory. You have to remember, the Guard was deployed in Memphis after Dr. King's assassination in 1968, an incredibly painful, racially charged time.
Right.
They were also deployed during major civil service strikes in 1978. So for many Memphians, especially in the black community, which makes up 63% of the city, the image of soldiers in the streets isn't neutral. It evokes memories of external control, of suppressing unrest, not necessarily of help.
It feels like an occupation, not assistance.
That's the word many use, overreach, occupation. It carries a heavy historical weight that makes this intervention feel particularly insensitive and potentially damaging to community trust.
Okay, this leads us towards another potential layer here. Is there a hidden agenda? Could this be about more than just crime? What about immigration?
That's a major area of concern, and the evidence suggests it's a very real possibility. I see Immigration and Customs Enforcement officially calls Memphis a sanctuary city.
Why? What does that mean in practice there?
It means the local Memphis police do not cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. They don't typically hold people for ICE or inquire about immigration status during routine police work.
And the concern is the Guard deployment could change that.
Exactly. The speculation, based on patterns elsewhere, is that this deployment, while publicly framed as crime fighting, could easily include or facilitate immigration sweeps. That the Guard or accompanying federal agents might use the increased presence and potentially relaxed protocols during an emergency to target undocumented immigrants.
So blending crime fighting with immigration enforcement using the military.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Turning military personnel, even indirectly, into part of the immigration enforcement apparatus. It's a huge shift and highly controversial. The insight is that the crime justification might be, at least partially, a cover for advancing a separate immigration agenda.
And we saw this happen in D.C., didn't we? That provides a pretty clear template.
It absolutely does. Immigration arrests were a significant part of the D.C. operation. Mayor Bowser herself said the immigration agents involved were not working for crime reduction. They were doing something else.
And Trump threatened D.C. over ICE cooperation.
Explicitly, he threatened to re-federalize the police if D.C. didn't help ICE. That link is undeniable. So the question becomes, is this Memphis deployment about crime, or is it partly about using the military to enforce immigration policy in a city that resists cooperation?
And people were detained for immigration reasons in D.C.
Hundreds were, yes. The D.C. experience strongly suggests that when these deployments happen in so-called sanctuary cities, immigration enforcement is very likely a key, if often unstated, objective.
Okay, pulling all these threads together, what does this mean for presidential power? What is President Trump actually claiming he's the authority to do here?
He's essentially claiming some truly sweeping and unprecedented powers. The power to federalize any city's police force whenever he decides. The power to involve the military directly in domestic law enforcement, sidestepping Posse Comitatus. The power to declare these crime emergencies pretty much at will, creating the justification for these actions.
It sounds like a fundamental reshaping of executive authority.
It really is. It's a massive expansion of presidential power into areas traditionally handled at the state and local level or legally restricted from military involvement.
But these claims, as we've discussed, seem to fly in the face of established laws and constitutional limits.
They absolutely do. Posse Comitatus is clear. The Home Rule Act has strict time limits. Federal judges are pushing back, ruling similar actions illegal. Congress theoretically holds the power to approve extensions or fund these operations, and states have inherent sovereignty over their own law enforcement.
So there are checks, but they seem to be under immense pressure.
Immense pressure. The administration seems determined to test, bend, or even break these established limits. It's forcing a confrontation over the very definition of presidential power versus constitutional constraints.
So what's the big takeaway? What's the long-term danger here? The precedent problem, as you called it.
The danger is exactly that. Precedent. Professor Charles McKinney at Rhodes College put it starkly. This is asserting the power of the presidency through the barrel of a gun.
If this stands, if deploying the military domestically for policing under vague emergency declarations becomes normalized, What stops future presidents from doing the same thing for their political reasons?
It opens a door that might be hard to close.
A very dangerous door. It
Yeah.
erodes federalism, the balance between federal and state power. It normalizes seeing soldiers on American streets involved in policing. That's a fundamental shift away from democratic norms which rely on civilian law enforcement.
So the question isn't just, is this legal right now? No, federal judges are already saying it isn't in related cases. The deeper question for you listening is, can anyone actually stop this expansion of power effectively? And if they can't, what does that mean for your city if someone decides to declare an emergency there someday?
A really sobering thought. So to wrap up, we started with Memphis, a city showing real success in reducing crime, yet facing this military deployment based on justifications that just don't seem to match the facts on the ground.
Right, and we've seen how this fits into a broader pattern targeting democratic cities, ignoring data from elsewhere, undermining local solutions, potentially linking it to immigration, and all while pushing the boundaries of presidential power against significant legal and constitutional challenges.
Well, we hope this discussion has given you, our listeners, a much clearer, more detailed picture of what's unfolding in Memphis, what happened in D.C., and why it matters way beyond those city limits.
Yeah, we really encourage you to think about all the different angles, the data, the legal arguments we've laid out as you form your own understanding of these really complex and important events.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And hey, if you're listening to this on YouTube, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out.
And if you're listening on Spotify, please give us a follow there so you don't miss our future conversations.
Until next time, keep seeking out those surprising facts, keep asking questions, and challenge the narratives.